Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we discuss the priority of the High Lords of Terra. A spoiler warning to begin, as the events we're discussing today are from the Warhammer 40k novel Morvenn Vahl, Spear of Faith, by author Jude Reid. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But so with that said, let's just jump straight in. Okay, so when I first stepped into the hobby back in the days of 2nd edition, the High Lords of Terra were nothing more than a mystery, the stated power on the far distant throne world, and so it remained for years. We were left in the safety of our ignorance to believe the High Lords of Terra actually cared about the people. Yet as the setting grew and evolved, the grimdark deepened, we began to receive glimpses into the reality, the selfishness, the corruption that has eaten away at these once proud and noble souls. We learnt that the Council was in truth a battlefield, contested between those who in fact did care for the Imperium beyond their walls, those precious few who remained pure to the original purpose of the Council, and those motivated by greed and self-interest, those who had become corrupted by their power. And it was a battlefield that even the returned Primarch Roboute Guilliman had to find himself waging into, cleansing many of the High Lords from their positions of power. However, even despite Guilliman's brutal overhaul, the conflict upon the Council remains. That conflict of opinion. And maybe, in all honesty, it's only right it does. Because isn't that the very reason for the Council? Why it is a council, and not a single voice after all. And it's a conflict that Morvenn Vahl, Abbess Sanctorum of the Adepta Sororitas, would find herself confronted by within her novel Spear of Faith. Now, Vahl, in accordance of her position, is a High Lord upon the Council, a new High Lord, and during the events of her novel Spear of Faith, she approaches her fellow Council members to send reinforcements to the world of Ophelia 7. Ophelia 7 is essentially the closest thing to a homeworld the Sisterhood has, alongside Holy Terra itself, of course. However, for Vahl, it would be a rude awakening for her in many ways, to see how even this reformed council by Guilliman himself is still reluctant to commit its forces. The Senate chamber is impossibly large, its black granite walls absorbing more than reflecting the flickering lumen light. But the expressions on the faces of the other High Lords are still clearly visible. Contempt, disdain, hostility. No, the Paternoval envoy Kadak Mir is the first to speak, the single syllable emerging from beneath his velvet hood in a rattling whisper. His seat is to the right of the empty throne, his misshapen body draped in layer upon layer of heavy robes. Every inch of his flesh from the hands up is hidden from sight, the wrists pale and bony, the fingers somehow too long as they taper towards the pointed nails at their tip. There is something about the Navigator that makes him difficult to look at directly, some subtle sense of wrongness, some inhumanity. Morvenn fixes her glare on the dark recess of the hood. She has no intention of looking away. Perhaps the good abbess will be kind enough to expand on her statement, says Mir. I said no, my lords. Morvenn straightens her back, and the Purgator Mirabilis mirrors her movement with a soft purr of motors. No, I decline your offer. No, a nebulous promise of reinforcements to be sent to Ophelia 7, when matters permit, is unacceptable. She makes no effort to keep the disgust from her voice. The threat is now, and my place, and the place of every Sister of Battle not presently engaged, is there. To ask me to stand by while it is under attack is an affront of the highest order. The Navigator tilts his shapeless hood to one side. To ask us to strip Holy Terra of its defences, to protect Ophelia 7 from some... He gives a wheezy laugh, like a dry wind through long dead bones. From some Night Lord's raid, would seem the greater affront. Inside her gauntlets, Morvenn's hands are taut with rage. The assault on the blessed Cardinal world is bad enough, but Kadak Mir's sheer obstinate idiocy is 1,000 times worse. How can he fail to see the importance of what she is telling him? The time for action has come, and yet he is content to sit in comfort and complacency. Now, maybe I'm getting a bit cantankerous and stubborn in my old age, but judging by what's said here, I can kind of see the High Lord's points here. Let's be honest, the galaxy is in absolute turmoil. Even with Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade stabilising Imperium Sanctus, this situation is barely a good one. You've got Leviathan pouring in from the west, and chaos absolutely everywhere. And Vahl's asking for Terra's defences to be sent out. That's a little risky to say the least. More than a little risky, given the situation. I mean, let's not forget there's been a demonic invasion on the throne world within recent memory. In fact, with the big time shift backwards, within very recent memory. And so I've got to be honest, I can understand the High Lord's point of view here. Sending out a vast portion of the defence of the throne world is not something I would necessarily condone. I think we could perhaps rightly look at Rogel doing much the same type of thing within the heresy, ensuring he kept the throne world safe. Sometimes, you have to prioritise what's important. You have to make the harsh decisions. Now, that said, it depends on the intent and reasoning behind it. If it's out of logic, or if the decisions are being made out of selfishness. It's hard to argue the attitude of the High Lords can make it hard to believe it's not one out of pettiness. He gives a wheezy laugh, like a dry wind through long dead bones. For some Night Lord's raid would seem the greater affront. Admittedly, Vahl's behaviour is most likely antagonising them in this situation. However, you'd expect members of the Imperium's ruling council to be able to deal with these kind of issues maturely and sensibly, not fall to petty statements and jabs like we see here. However, Vahl continues to argue her case, that the Night Lord known as the Death of Saints is a threat that must be stopped. Morvenn draws a deep breath, holds it, then exhales to a silent count of 5. This meeting has turned to a tangle of words, a morass that sucks at her ankles, slowing her progress, dragging her down. What slaughter has already been inflicted on the Cardinal world in the time she has wasted here? Should that name mean something to us? Kadak Mir asks. For centuries, he has made it his business to hunt the Sisters of the Argent Shroud. His strike cruiser appears without warning, slaughters without mercy, and vanishes without trace. Sometimes he appears again mere months later, other times generations pass before he returns to burn our shrines, to slaughter our sisters. But never before has he come to Ophelia 7. We have an opportunity to deal with a threat that has plagued my order for 1,000 years, and you would squander it with your inactivity. I see no reason for such urgency, mere shrugs. By your own admission, this death of saints will return in time, by which point we may all be dust. He certainly bears an impressive title. The remark comes from Cardinal Retira, another of the Avenging Sun's appointments to the Council of High Lords. She is a soft-faced woman, her face creased in an expression of gentle compassion. But Morvenn is not deceived by the mildness of her appearance. No doubt the ecclesiarch wears a similar expression, while she watches the heterical and the heterodox sent to the pyre. Is the sobriquet self-styled, or awarded by your order? My order has nothing for him but his death, and that is long overdue. Morvenn shakes her head, but the title will suffice for its accuracy alone. Shall I recite the names of those slaughtered at his hand? The saints whose severed heads rot on his armour rack, the slain pilgrims, the murdered sisters. That will not be necessary, Abbess Sanctorum. Grandmaster Fadix of the Assassinorum extends a placating hand. He is a small man dressed in a plain grey robe, forgettable in every detail, other than the way he holds himself. Every movement of his body made with careful, deliberate grace. He may look like a simple adept, but if what Morvenn suspects of him is true, he is the deadliest in the room. Regardless of the heretic's sins, you must understand the reticence of this council to acquiesce to your wishes. The blessed Abbess Sabrina, your predecessor, was lost on such a warp voyage, and these are unsettled times. The sisterhood cannot stand to lose another Abbess Sanctorum so soon after your investiture. And that perhaps gives a clue to the wider concerns the High Lords consider that Vahl doesn't. The perception, the effect, of losing another Abbess Sanctorum in quick succession. Fadix is a High Lord who worked directly with Guilliman to eliminate the High Lords who were rebelling against him. So Fadix is no fool. If he reasons stability is needed, then it's a fair and rational claim. I mean, this is the Master of the Assassinorum we're talking about here. However, Vahl is very much only the warrior, and thus she thinks that way too. Emotional in this issue. Not yet the politician she needs to be. And she won't hear it. And she can't understand it. And we see here too, the Cardinal appointed by Guilliman himself, also disagreeing with Vahl's desire. So we can't use the old claim that all the High Lords are corrupted, ingrained in their point of view. We have Fadix, who helped Guilliman remove the rebel High Lords of Terra, and we have the Cardinal, who is a new appointment by the returned Primarch himself. Yet both disagree with Vahl here. So we have to admit, there must be some logic to their argument. And we also get an appearance from the Fabricator General in this council, who unfortunately is only referred to as the Fabricator General. But he's quite clearly not Raskian, judging by his appearance. So, though it's far from confirmed, we could well have our first sighting of a new fabricator general here, in light of Raskian's believed disappearance and death. But I digress. Again and again the comments here come down to a question of resources. The navigator, Mir, raises his bony hands in mock placation. But not every attack is of planet-shattering proportions. Your own histories are full of such incursions. Minor raids, easily driven back into the warp from whence they came. To underestimate the enemy is to court defeat, and to overestimate them is to commit resources we can ill afford to lose to a fool's errand. And again, Fadix clears his throat. My Lord Navigator, it is natural that the Abbess should wish harm on the enemies of the Imperium, and any threat to the Convent Sanctorum is a threat to the Ecclesiarchy itself. He turns to her, a smile that is no doubt meant to be reassuring on his forgettable face. But it is perhaps worth remembering that your sisters do not stand alone. The Brotherhood of the Black Templars are there to grant any protection they might require. And again, I treasure the Cardinal world just as you do. Eos Retira's voice is full of reproach, but the resources with which the God Emperor blesses us are far from infinite, and you would draw them away from Holy Terra on a voyage of futility. And this in truth reveals the heart of it. Vahl here cares only for Ophelia 7, her orders and her sisterhood, but the High Lords are playing a game of chess on a galactic scale, judging when and where to commit the resources they have, what moves they can and can't make. I'm the first to criticise the High Lord's selfishness, and we have done countless times over the years. But here, honestly, I can see the logic of their opinions. Again, this is the new council, with many of its members personally appointed by Guilliman. They may not be perfect, but they are better than they were previously. They've supplied the Indomitus Crusade and launched the counter-assault against Leviathan. There absolutely must come a time where they have to say no. Every world cannot be reinforced, and that is the brutal truth. Morvenn Vahl is a peerless warrior, but now she has to learn to become a politician too, to fight a different kind of war, one fought not on the battlefield, but one fought in the council chamber. And that's a battlefield that truly decides the fate of the Imperium. But as always everyone, what do you think? Is this a situation of yet more High Lord selfishness? Or actually, like me, can you see the point of the High Lords here? That a Night Lord's raid against a world manned by the Sisters of Battle and Black Templars isn't on the face of it an issue that deserves the reinforcements of the Throne World? Is this a case of those harsh decisions that need to be made? The times where honestly, no is perhaps the right answer. Or do you feel no matter who is upon the council, whoever Guilliman appoints, they will never be able to act as decisively as they need to? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.